Corvette reveals their new for 2024 Z06 GT3R before the Rolex 24. And we hear of the first confirmed customer team to emerge. Meanwhile, the LMP2 finish was not the closest finish that fans witnessed at Daytona. Let's talk about all the other news coming out of the Rolex 24 weekend. Corvette has officially unveiled their new Z06 GT3R that will enter competition in 2024, featuring a 5.5-liter flat-plane V8 derived from the production Corvette Z06. It will share over 70% of its engine components with that production engine, with the ultimate goal here to design and produce a GT3 spec Corvette that's able to race around the world. And with this announcement, it sure seems like we're going to see more Corvettes, not only on the IMSA grid, but they also announced a planned 2-car effort in the World Endurance Championship. In fact, also with this announcement, emerged a team that's going to be running this car from a customer standpoint in IMSA. Current Michelin Pilot Challenge team Rebel Rock Racing will make the step up to the WeatherTech Championship with a customer Corvette in 2024. Before the Rolex even got underway, the GTD pole-sitting Windward Racing Mercedes found themselves on the back foot after a huge practice crash that sent driver Lucas Auer to the hospital on Thursday. Auer was running the car in practice when he lost control of the car and crashed into the concrete wall on the exit of turn 2. The safety team would have to extract him through the roof of the car, ultimately having to cut the roll cage, and it would require a replacement chassis. I don't know if I'd say it luckily for the team in this situation, because this is a pretty unlucky thing to have happen, but fortunately for the team, they did have a replacement car at their shop in Texas, and they were able to truck that in. They were also able to draft in former Allegra Motorsports Mercedes GT3 driver Daniel Morad to fill in that seat. The team worked very, very hard to prepare this car and ultimately had it ready to go for the start of the Rolex on Saturday afternoon. The team and drivers, especially Morad, they came together exceptionally well in this race and put forward a very, very strong effort, contending for the lead throughout the entirety of the race. However, contact late in the race from a safety car restart ultimately forced them to retire the car and end their Rolex just a little bit early. Regardless, it was a great showing for the team despite the events that unfolded over the previous days, and it has been announced that Auer underwent successful surgery and is expected to make a full recovery. Sportscar 365 reported this weekend that IMSA is open to an LMH manufacturer coming over to the series mid-season and competing in races. IMSA technical director Matt Kurdock said, "We just need enough notice from an LMH manufacturer to be able to schedule the aerodynamic evaluation and all of the analysis that is associated with it." Now, this definitely isn't confirmation that they're fielding inquiries from LMH manufacturers. It certainly isn't a bad sign that IMSA would be willing to put the work in mid-season to be able to accommodate an LMH manufacturer that maybe wanted to pop in for one of the later season races at, say, Indy or Petit Le Mans. This certainly wasn't something that I expected to hear coming out of this weekend, but really it gets me thinking, how great would it be to see a Toyota or a Ferrari LMH also running on the grid before the end of this season? This might have been the Rolex 24 weekend, but the WeatherTech Championship was not the only class out on track this past weekend. The Michelin Pilot Challenge had their season opening BMW M Endurance race on Friday. The 4-hour race really saw some great battles throughout it, and ultimately saw NASCAR drivers Harrison Burton and Zane Smith taking the win in the GS class with their PF Racing Ford Mustang. They beat out the number 83 BGB Motorsports Porsche by right around 0.7 of a second, while fellow NASCAR drivers Hailie Deegan and Ben Rhodes completed the podium in the other PF Racing Ford. GS wasn't the only class with a close finish. In TCR, it was Gavin Ernstone and John Morley winning in their first-generation Audi RS3 by just 0.4 of a second over the number 73 LA Honda World Civic. That number 73 was driven by Mike Lamera and William Talley. Meanwhile, the number 98 Brian Herta Autosport entry of Mark Wilkins and Mason Filippi rounded out that podium. And you can't talk about IMSA Support Series races without talking about the MX5 Cup. They also had their first 2 rounds of the season, and as you would expect, they did not disappoint. Race 1 saw the 4th closest finish in MX5 Cup history, and it was actually 1/1000th of a second closer than the LMP2 finish that we would see in the Rolex. And it was Tyler Gonzalez that emerged victorious in his number 51 Copeland Motorsports entry. After not the strongest qualifying effort, Tyler Gonzalez, who started 19th, would make his way through the field over the course of this race, and timed his final move coming through the NASCAR Tri-Oval perfectly to be able to capture this victory. As I just mentioned, he would win by 15/1000ths of a second over the second place finishing Connor Zilic, in what was a 3-wide finish with the third place finishing Sam Paley on the inside. Overall, the top 9 finishers in this race were separated by just 4/10ths of a second. Race 2 was no slouch either, with the race being decided by a 1-lap dash to the finish line after a late safety car. This time it would be 2022 MX5 Cup champion Jared Thomas, who timed his move perfectly to get around race 1 winner Tyler Gonzalez to take that victory by just under 1/10 of a second. The 2 cars kind of broke away from third place finishing Gresham Wagner on that 1-lap shootout. Gresham Wagner would finish about 1.1 seconds behind. And this race really featured some great racing and great saves also out on track. Most notably was between Sam Paley and Max Sapolsky going into turn 1. The two made a little bit of contact after they were racing for kind of the same piece of real estate going into the corner, and ultimately both cars kind of kicked out sideways, and you just see both drivers really having to work the wheel to save those cars and prevent them from looping around. Ultimately, it was 2 great saves by 2 great drivers, and you can go and check out the entirety of the first 2 races of the season on the IMSA YouTube channel. Their next race of the season comes in support of IndyCar, March 3rd to 5th at St. Pete's. Well, the opening race weekend for IMSA was packed with excitement, but none more so than the headlining Rolex 24 at Daytona. You can check out everything that you need to know coming out of the 2023 Rolex 24 at Daytona right here. A big shout out to all of our early Patreon supporters. If you too want to support the show, you can head to patreon.com/offintheesses. But once again, thanks for tuning in. I hope everyone has a great race weekend. It doesn't go off in the S's.